Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, I want to know where are you watching from? Because the story I'm about to tell might feel too close to home for some of you, and I promise it will leave you thinking about trust, family, and boundaries in ways you never expected. My mother-in-law had a talent for masking her true intentions behind the warmest smile, but that night, the smile was hiding something far more sinister. She poured a drink for me, thinking I wouldn't notice, a so-called special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law, her hands slightly trembling, betraying a secret she thought I couldn't see. I thanked her politely and, without drawing attention, swapped my glass with Gerald's, the man who had spent years criticizing everything I did. 45 minutes later, Gerald was pale, sweating, bolting toward the bathroom while I quietly observed from across the table, a strange calm settling in my chest. My name is Julian Mercer, 32 years old, an independent photographer based in Asheville, North Carolina. I built my business from nothing, shooting weddings that paid the bills, creating magazine spreads that challenged my creativity, and traveling on wildlife assignments that pushed me to extremes. Every frame I captured was proof of the life I'd chosen. And yet, despite every achievement, every published work, my in-laws, especially Diane, never saw me as enough. How's that little photography hobby of yours going? Gerald would ask at family dinners, dripping with condescension, never hiding his disdain. He measured life in stock options, square footage, and company cars. Every Sunday dinner felt like a test I could never pass. Diane, equally manipulative though subtler, fussed over her daughter Haley while simultaneously undermining me, praising my work but framing it as a temporary phase, a hobby that would soon end. Haley, sensing the tension, would squeeze my hand under the table, silently apologizing for her parents while I kept my composure because I loved her, and I didn't want her to choose sides. That week, I had been photographing bison in Montana, trudging through knee-deep snow for a National Geographic assignment. My muscles ached, my boots were caked in ice, and my memory card held enough images to pay our mortgage for 3 months. Yet Haley insisted we attend her mother's birthday dinner. Just a couple hours, she said. I should have listened to the knot of unease forming in my stomach. In the kitchen, Diane's eyes darted nervously as she handed me the drink, the slight tremor in her fingers betraying her intent. I made it special, just for you, she said, far too brightly. Something inside me warned me, but I didn't fully grasp the danger until later. Haley and I had met 6 years ago at an art exhibition. She was finishing her master's in environmental science. I was beginning to make a name for myself as a photographer. Our connection was instant. She understood the way I viewed the world, through a lens, and I admired her unwavering passion for protecting it. Her parents, however, were a completely different story. Gerald had always made it clear he had imagined someone different for his daughter, a man with a steady job, a retirement plan, a company car. Diane, on the other hand, praised my work but subtly reminded me that my career wasn't stable enough to be a proper match for Haley. Over the years, I tried everything to gain their approval: expensive wine, showing published work, dropping names of high-profile clients, but I was always the photographer and never truly their son-in-law. Last Christmas, I overheard Diane on the phone, saying Haley could have married Thomas, the orthopedic surgeon, with family money, but she chose the creative one, her tone laced with disdain. Gerald, more blunt, warned me that children were expensive and that I might want a real career before starting a family. I never told Haley. She loved her parents despite everything, and I didn't want to force her into a choice. Still, small signs were everywhere. Diane pulling Haley into the kitchen whenever I discussed projects, my exclusion from family photos, Gerald suggesting Haley see therapy for impulsive decisions while staring directly at me. I ignored them, thinking time would bring acceptance. I was wrong. That Friday, I returned from Montana with wine-burned cheeks, exhausted, yet dressed and ready for dinner. At their colonial-style home, dinner began predictably, Gerald boasting about deals, Diane fussing over table settings, Haley's brother Owen and his wife Vanessa making polite conversation. I nursed a beer, counting the minutes until we could leave. Then Diane brought her famed sangria. I noticed 2 glasses, separate from the rest. As I approached, I saw her pour something colorless and odorless from a vial into one glass, concealing it expertly. Julian, I've got this. This one's for you, she said, voice far too cheerful. My throat tightened. I calmly took both glasses and placed the tampered one in front of Gerald. 45 minutes later, Gerald was violently ill, his face pale and sweat-soaked. Diane's expression drained as she realized her plan had failed. I didn't react, didn't confront her, simply continued my dessert as Haley rushed to her father's side. At that moment, I knew two things. 1, Diane had tried to poison me, and 2, she knew I knew. The anger I felt wasn't explosive, it was cold, deliberate. I would not let this slide, but I would make them confront who they truly were, on their terms, not mine. That Monday, I took the glass to Jason, a former client who ran a toxicology lab. When I explained the situation, he tested it. 3 days later, he called. The drink contained benzodiazepines, nothing lethal, but enough to incapacitate someone for hours. That night, I told Haley I wanted to skip Sunday dinner to focus on an upcoming exhibition. She was disappointed but understanding. I didn't tell her about the results yet. I needed more information. Over the next 2 weeks, I investigated. Diane had prescriptions for Xanax from multiple doctors, which she'd been misusing for years. Rumors circulated about her strange behavior and theft accusations, all meticulously hidden by her family. I compiled every piece of evidence, waiting for the right moment. Haley mentioned her mother wanted photos for social media. I agreed, but I arrived alone with a camera bag in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. Diane, perfectly made up and dressed expensively, was waiting. I handed her the envelope containing the toxicology report and prescription printouts. Her hands trembled as she read. "This is absurd," she whispered. I cut her off. "What I don't know is why you tried to make me sick. You're not good enough for my daughter. You never will be. A man should provide security, not pictures, and drugging your daughter's husband provides security." I kept my voice calm. "No, you made me sick to make me miss my gallery opening, to show Haley I was unreliable." Her face hardened. I told her, "Here's what happens next. You will tell Gerald what you did. Then you will start treating me with respect, not because you suddenly like me, but because the alternative is Haley knowing exactly who you are." Diane laughed, hollowly, insisting Haley would never believe me. I left without taking a single photo. That night, Diane called Haley in tears, claiming I'd been hostile. When Haley confronted me, I showed her everything: lab reports, prescriptions, hostile texts over the years. She was quiet, shocked. The next day, she confronted her parents. Her eyes were red from crying. She whispered that her father called it a misunderstanding, blaming insecurity about my career. I nodded, knowing this was only the beginning of a battle to reclaim our lives. Over the next 2 weeks, I poured myself into uncovering the full extent of what Diane and Gerald were capable of, driven by a mix of anger, disbelief, and a fierce determination to protect Haley and myself. I reached out to Vanessa, Owen's wife, who quietly admitted that they had faced a similar pattern of manipulation when she married into the family. Her warnings and insights helped me connect the dots in ways I hadn't fully realized before. Vanessa sent me a USB drive containing home security footage from their house, which revealed Diane slipping the substance into my glass with meticulous care and Gerald completely aware, yet choosing not to intervene. Watching the footage, my stomach turned, not just from fear of what could have happened, but from the realization that this was a carefully orchestrated system of control designed to undermine anyone who might challenge their authority over Haley's life. I watched the videos repeatedly, taking meticulous notes, trying to absorb every gesture, every whispered command, every subtle manipulation that spanned years of their lives. There were clips from 2 days after the dinner, showing Diane and Gerald arguing over how to handle me, calculating the narrative to plant seeds of doubt in Haley's mind. Gerald's voice, cold and dismissive, told Diane, "It's his word against ours. Haley will never choose him over family, and if she does, she's not the daughter we raised." Diane's face, steely and unflinching, confirmed the horrifying truth. This was never a one-time incident. Their obsession with controlling Haley's life extended to every relationship, every choice, every opportunity she pursued. I felt a surge of clarity and resolve. This was no longer just about my safety, or proving I had been wronged. This was about exposing a pattern of manipulation and reclaiming Haley's autonomy, which they had been undermining for years. I began reaching out to other ex-boyfriends and friends of Haley's who had mysteriously drifted away. With each conversation, A consistent story emerged. Anyone who encouraged her independence had gradually been pushed out, with Diane and Gerald whispering doubts, planting evidence, and creating a climate of mistrust. Thomas, Haley's previous fiancé, confirmed that her parents had actively worked to sabotage their relationship, planting doubts about his fidelity and motivations. Each revelation tightened the knot of resolve in my chest. I compiled all this evidence meticulously: emails, messages, video files, witness statements, everything I could find to illustrate the systematic nature of their interference. Then, I took the boldest step, inviting Owen and Vanessa over for dinner under the pretense of a casual visit, not revealing the full extent of my plan to Haley. When they arrived, I connected my laptop to the TV, telling them, "There's something you both need to see." For the next hour, we watched the videos together, every clip revealing betrayal after betrayal, manipulation after manipulation, both Diane and Gerald caught in their patterns of control and deceit. Haley sat motionless, her face pale, absorbing each painful frame. Owen whispered in disbelief, shaking his head, muttering, "That's not my parents." Vanessa, quietly supportive, confirmed the same pattern had happened to her when she married into the family. By the end, Haley's eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice was steady when she asked why I hadn't told her sooner. I explained that she needed to see it firsthand to understand the breadth of their manipulation, not just what had happened to me but how it had shaped her entire life. The truth settled like a weight on all of us. The following day, Diane called Haley, attempting to spin the narrative, suggesting the footage had been manipulated, implying I had always been jealous and insecure. Haley, however, had seen everything with her own eyes and refused to let their words shift her understanding. That evening, we began to plan how to confront the manipulation directly, knowing it wouldn't be easy and that both Diane and Gerald would attempt to twist the truth, turn the tables, and make us doubt ourselves. It was a delicate balance, exposing them without alienating Haley further, reinforcing evidence with undeniable proof, and preparing for the emotional fallout. During this time, I maintained focus on work, spending long hours in my studio, developing photographs, and keeping my mind occupied, all while mentally rehearsing the confrontation that was looming. Each image I processed reminded me of my purpose and the life Haley and I were building together, independent, creative, and unmanipulated by outside forces. I contacted Thomas again, gathering his emails and notes, corroborating the pattern of interference from years prior. Every detail was meticulously recorded, every timeline verified, and slowly the picture became clear. Diane and Gerald were not merely controlling parents, they were orchestrators of influence, strategically inserting themselves into the lives of their children's partners to ensure compliance with their version of loyalty and success. This understanding fueled a deliberate calm in me. There would be no rash confrontation, no outburst, only precise, evidence-driven action. Vanessa provided additional security footage showing Gerald's awareness and Diane's relentless discussions about how they would handle me post-dinner. I compiled all this onto a single drive, ready for the moment when exposure would become inevitable. That weekend, I returned to their home under the guise of taking family photos, but this time I was armed with the truth. Diane, perfect and composed, greeted me, unaware that I had all the documentation needed to change the balance of power. I handed her the USB drive, stating simply, "Everything you've done, captured for the record." Her hands trembled slightly, her perfect composure cracking as she processed the proof. I didn't shout, I didn't scream, I let the evidence speak. The tension in the room was palpable, and in that moment, I realized control had shifted. This was no longer a game they could manipulate, the scales were even. The evidence was indisputable, every act of deceit documented and time-stamped. Diane attempted to deny, to minimize, to gaslight, but I remained calm, measured, and deliberate, letting her words fade under the weight of undeniable facts. It was only a matter of time before the confrontation with Haley, Owen, and Vanessa solidified what had been uncovered. For the first time, I understood the full extent of the psychological games, the patterns of coercion, and the years of subtle control that had infiltrated not only my life but Haley's entire world. It was a chilling revelation, but one that clarified the path forward: exposure, transparency, and a reclamation of agency for both Haley and myself. The night of the confrontation arrived. Haley, Owen, Vanessa, and I walked into Gerald and Diane's house with a sense of purpose that neither of them could anticipate. From the moment we entered, Gerald wore his usual confident smirk. Diane greeted us with practiced warmth, and I calmly carried my camera bag, tripod, and the USB drive filled with every piece of evidence we had compiled. I announced that I was documenting this conversation for the family archives. Diane immediately objected, insisting that this was private family business, but I replied calmly, exactly. It's family business, and I am family, even though you've tried very hard to change that. We sat together in the living room, tension thick in the air, and I began showing them clip after clip, Diane slipping the substance into my glass, Gerald watching knowingly, and their calculated discussions in the days that followed about how to manipulate Haley's perception of me. Each denial they offered crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Gerald's confident tone faltered, Diane's perfectly rehearsed composure began to crack, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in their eyes. Haley, sitting beside me, absorbed everything, tears streaming silently, her hands trembling. Owen whispered disbelief after disbelief, muttering, "That's not my parents. That's impossible." Vanessa, quietly supportive, confirmed the same pattern had happened to her years earlier. I let them see every email, every text, every security clip, each one methodically revealing the scope of manipulation and control that had dominated their relationships with their children. Finally, Haley stood, her voice firm yet filled with emotion. "Mom, Dad, I love you, but what you've done is unforgivable. You don't get to control my life anymore. You don't get to decide who I trust or who I marry." Diane began to cry, not in remorse, but in the realization that she was losing control over the narrative she had spent years constructing. Gerald sat stunned, unable to comprehend that the children he believed would always obey him had now witnessed the truth. I handed Gerald a USB drive, saying simply, "This contains everything: footage, emails, testimonies. It's yours to keep." His brow furrowed, suspicious. "What's that supposed to mean?" I calmly replied, "It means I'm not going to ruin your reputation by sharing this publicly. That would hurt Haley, and I would never do that. But if you ever try to interfere in our marriage again, if you attempt to manipulate or speak against me, copies will go to every member of your country club, every business partner, and your social circle. The choice is yours." For the first time, I saw something resembling respect in Gerald's eyes. 6 months later, Haley and Owen began therapy to process the emotional damage caused by their parents, while Diane and Gerald kept their distance, sending occasional texts but respecting the boundaries we had established. Over the holidays, they even invited us to dinner, a cautious attempt at a fresh start. Haley wanted to go, hoping to see her parents make an effort, and I agreed, though cautiously. That night, everything appeared normal. Diane had prepared a lavish feast, Gerald asked genuine questions about my latest photography projects, and there was a sense of tentative civility. Later, Gerald pulled me aside into his study, offering me a partnership in his firm. "Your photography is good," he said, pouring a scotch. "We respect how you handled the past." "This is an olive branch." I set the glass down, untouched. "I appreciate the offer," I replied, "but it's another attempt at control. You can't buy me, Gerald, and you cannot change the fact that Haley loves me as I am." Gerald's smile tightened, frustration and disbelief mingling on his face. I walked back to the dining room where Diane was showing Haley photo albums, trying to recreate a nostalgic connection. Haley caught my eye, and I gave a slight nod. It was time for her to speak. "Mom, Dad," she announced clearly, "we have something to tell you. We're having a baby." Silence fell over the room. Diane's hands froze over the album. Gerald blinked rapidly, and for the first time in years, their world shifted because of a life they had no control over. Haley's voice was steady, but her eyes reflected the years of manipulation and hurt. She continued, "This child will be raised with love, autonomy, and honesty. And no one, not even you, will manipulate or control us." I watched as the gravity of her words sank in. They had lost the ability to dictate her path, and finally, the consequences of their actions were undeniable. Weeks passed, and slowly, the tension eased. Haley and I spent long hours discussing our future, our priorities, and the life we wanted to create, a life built on trust, creativity, and mutual respect. I realized something essential. Control can never replace love, and fear cannot sustain loyalty. Diane and Gerald, stripped of their manipulative influence, were forced to confront the reality that their children were now autonomous individuals, capable of making their own decisions, unbound by fear or manipulation. As I reflect on these events, the lesson becomes clear. The people who try to control, manipulate, or undermine you may appear invincible, but evidence, truth, and courage are stronger than fear and deceit. Protecting those you love requires patience, strategy, and the willingness to stand firm even when the odds seem overwhelming. Never allow manipulation to go unchecked, because silence and inaction are the enablers of control. So, if you're watching this today, remember, trust your instincts, gather your evidence, protect your boundaries, and always stand up for yourself and those you love. The truth, no matter how buried or inconvenient, will always find its way to the surface. Never let anyone tell you that you are not enough. Protect your life, protect your people, and always, always believe in your own worth.